My name is Elias Vance, and I hail from the dusty plains of Amarillo, Texas. My upbringing was a tapestry woven with three distinct threads: the rich aroma of simmering adobo and pancit, the boisterous gatherings of my extended family, and the comforting hymns of Sunday Mass. These three pillars, so integral to my Filipino heritage, could be distilled into three simple yet profound directives: live with kindness, act with integrity, and maintain faith. There was a word, a single syllable in Tagalog, that held immense power for me: Anna. To hear it spoken by my mother, Isabella, or my father, Ricardo, was to be enveloped in a warm embrace, a tangible expression of unconditional love. It meant my child, my son, but for me, it resonated with a deeper meaning: pure, unadulterated acceptance. At 24, I found myself in the concrete jungle of New York City, chasing the elusive dream of gracing the Broadway stage. Amidst the auditions and rejections, amidst the relentless hustle and bustle, I experienced another profound shift. I fell in love. It was a promise I'd made to myself, a silent vow that when love found me, I would share it with my parents. Coincidentally, this emotional awakening coincided with another momentous occasion. I landed a dream job, a chance to perform and sing at the magical kingdom of Disney World. This meant a hasty return to Texas, a whirlwind 24 hours to pack my life into suitcases and, more importantly, to fulfill that long-held promise. Although my relationship had ended abruptly just before my departure, the depth of the love I felt for another man remained undeniable. The flight back was a blur of conflicting emotions. Excitement for the new job warred with the heavy weight of the impending conversation. Stepping off the plane and into the familiar Texas heat felt surreal, as if I was straddling two worlds. I drove straight to my family home, the familiar stucco house with its meticulously manicured lawn. My parents were preparing for work, the usual morning routine in full swing. My mother was in the garage, about to get into her car, a faded blue sedan that had been with our family for years. I intercepted her, placing my hand firmly on the passenger door, preventing her from closing it. She looked up at me, a question mark etched on her brow. The scent of her floral perfume filled the air, a familiar comfort that suddenly felt foreign. "Mom," I began, my voice trembling slightly, "I have something to tell you." The urgency of the morning was palpable: the clatter of dishes from inside the house, the distant rumble of a neighbor's truck. This wasn't the ideal setting, but I knew I couldn't wait any longer. I took a deep breath and uttered the words that had been weighing on me for so long: "I'm gay." The vibrant energy that usually radiated from my mother seemed to drain away. Her face paled, her eyes widening in disbelief. The Texas sun, usually so bright, seemed to dim. The air grew heavy. "No, you're not," she whispered, her voice barely audible. My father, who had been inside, emerged from the house, drawn by the sudden shift in the atmosphere. He glanced at me, then at my mother, his brow furrowed. "We'll deal with that tomorrow," he said curtly, before getting into his own vehicle and driving off. The car door slammed shut, the sound echoing in the sudden silence. That night was restless. I tossed and turned, replaying the scene in my head, anticipating the conversation to come. The next morning arrived with a heavy pall. I was awakened by the sound of my mother's sobs, a heart-wrenching sound that tore through the quiet house. Descending the stairs, I found her in the living room, her hands outstretched towards me, her face etched with pain and confusion. "Are you okay? What's wrong? How did this happen?" she pleaded, her voice choked with tears. The ensuing argument was a whirlwind of emotions, a tempest that raged through every room of the house. How could this be? Why? Where did we go wrong? Her words were like sharp shards of glass, piercing the fragile bubble of my carefully constructed world. The air crackled with tension, the scent of burnt coffee lingering from the untouched breakfast. The argument raged for what felt like an eternity, 2, perhaps 3 hours of raised voices and tearful accusations. Then, the words that would forever be etched in my memory: "I want the son I raised back." The weight of her words settled upon me like a physical burden, a suffocating blanket of shame. I felt myself shrinking, becoming smaller and smaller, disappearing into the shadows. I got into my car, the interior still warm from the Texas sun, and began the long drive to Orlando. The happiest place on earth felt like a cruel irony, a stark contrast to the turmoil within me. I felt as though I had retreated back into the closet, the walls closing in around me once more. The three pillars of my upbringing, be good, do what's right, and pray, echoed in my mind, now tinged with guilt and confusion. The absence of that cherished word, Anak, amplified the emptiness within me. After my contract ended, I made the ill-fated decision to return home, a misguided attempt to prove to my parents that I was okay. In doing so, I inadvertently confined myself once again, unable to live authentically. Seeking solace and self-discovery, I found myself back in New York City, drawn back to the world of the arts, the one constant in my life that had always provided a mirror to my soul. I enrolled in an acting class in the heart of Times Square, a chaotic yet vibrant space that pulsed with energy. We were tasked with writing a personal monologue, something deeply personal, something we wouldn't readily share with a stranger. The choice was obvious, my coming out story. Each monologue was performed for a chosen classmate, a single individual with whom we were meant to connect on a profound level. I chose a woman named Serafina. Her gentle demeanor and warm smile reminded me of my mother, and I realized, with a pang of longing, that a part of me still yearned to share my truth with her, perhaps even to find some form of healing. When the moment came to perform, I stood on the small stage, the bright lights blurring my vision. Serafina sat patiently by the door. I drew a complete blank. Every word I had carefully crafted vanished from my mind. In a moment of panic, I pulled a chair to the center of the stage, a desperate attempt to buy myself some time. As I sat down, my gaze met Serafina's. Suddenly, the floodgates opened. Tears streamed down my face as the memories came rushing back, the garage, my mother's heartbroken expression, the weight of, be good, do what's right, and pray. I recounted the entire story, the words flowing from me in a torrent of emotion. When I finished, my acting teacher, Mr. Davies, a man with a keen eye and a gentle spirit, asked me how it felt. I was still shaking, still reeling from the emotional intensity of the performance. I think I had an out-of-body experience, I stammered, wiping away the tears. He then turned to Serafina and asked her what my monologue had meant to her. I looked at her, and saw tears glistening in her eyes. She stood up, walked towards me, and embraced me in a warm hug. Then, she whispered in my ear, 3 times, the word that had held so much power over me, Anak. 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 Before pulling away, she added, my former husband was Filipino. I understand. That moment with Serafina was a turning point. The meaning of Anak shifted. I realized that I had always been my parents' son, regardless of my sexuality. My love for another man didn't negate the bond we shared. It didn't change who I was at my core. It was a truth they still struggled to fully grasp, but it was my truth, and I no longer needed their validation to embrace it. From that day forward, I stopped seeking their approval. I led with the love I knew resided within me, the love that had always been there. And because they saw that unwavering self-acceptance, they began to follow suit. Now, things are different. My parents call me Anak again, and it's no longer a desperate plea for acceptance, but a genuine expression of love. I can finally receive their love without reservation. They've met my partner, and we're all looking forward to celebrating Thanksgiving together, a blending of families that I once thought impossible. The yearning I once felt to hear that word, Anak, has transformed into a quiet understanding. I know, I think to myself with a smile. I know I am the son you've always loved,